Hi everyone, I'm Jim Tolles. I'm a spiritual teacher. Today I want to talk about inappropriately awakening energy. This is an important topic, something I touch on frequently, but I want to go into further depth on it today because we have such amazing access to all kinds of spiritual tools now that people can wake up their energy and then not know what to do. Before I go any further, just a reminder that I have more links below this video. On YouTube, there's usually a little arrow button that people can click on their phones if you're on your phone to find all the other information that's been put there. And of course, if it's on my blog post where this video has been posted, that'll be easy to find. But there are more resources and blog posts and videos about what to do. Some of you have probably heard of the different spiritual tools that are now available. Things like Kundalini meditation or Kundalini yoga. And Kundalini is one way to express the energy in our body. One way of thinking about the energy system that's in our bodies. And it's aimed at awakening it. There are other things, tantric processes, some of the deep breath work, the tools that have been created that are usually built off of some of these older ones. Different psychedelic and mind-altering substances. There are a number of different things that really part of their purpose is to create a shift, a very significant shift. Meditation isn't usually going to be one of those tools. It's a very gentle tool. And for most people, that really is just going to be relaxing. These other tools, though, the purpose is very different. They're trying to excite energy. And oftentimes we come to them with this naive thinking like, oh, this will just feel good, particularly the Tantra stuff. And depending on what they do with it, it can just be a good feeling experience. But sometimes it's very deliberate where there's this breathing into the base of the spine and this intention to draw energy to the top of the head, up through the spine, and these types of things. And that is very clearly trying to wake somebody up. And it is inappropriate as a practitioner or for the person doing it to do this without knowing what to do if it works. It's like, let's launch a rocket to the moon and not know how to bring the astronaut back. Could you imagine? NASA's just like, well, let's just fire it off. And so you know how you're going to get Neil Armstrong back? We'll figure it out. Just think about that for a second, because this is quite literally kind of a similar magnitude. That when you awaken somebody's energy, you're ending their current lifestyle. Not their life, their body is fine. Although the body goes into a lot of shifts, a lot of experiences, a lot of sensations, a lot of things that people didn't know that they had stored inside. Whoops, here it is. Now you have to deal with it. And that's usually just the layer of stuff that actually, if you ask most people, do you know that this issue was here? It's like, yeah, I knew about it. And that's just the beginning. There are whole loads of unconscious attachments that we build up in childhood. And there are no memories to that. To a lot of it. I mean, some people have fragments of memories, but there's a lot of just kind of memoryless, emotional, and physical stuff that we move through as we dissolve these deeper attachments that came out of childhood. And people have to be prepared for that. This is a major life commitment to awaken one's energy. And when it's inappropriately done, what starts to happen? The person freaks out. That's usually the first part, where the mind has not been prepared. This is why it's inappropriate. The mind's not prepared. It sees these new sensations as bad or scary, or if they're pleasurable at first, as everlasting as everyone is beautiful all the time, as right. So this is kind of a light washing thing. So light washing means to project the light kind of that's shining out of you onto others. In the same way that if we ignite a flame, right, it makes everything around it look brighter. And when we're in those initial stages, for some people where it's really blissful, like everybody just looks beautiful all the time, but the ego's not prepared for that either, because it starts to assume that people will act from that beauty, and they don't. Everybody is allowed to act from whatever story they want to believe in. And usually, as people start to realize, a lot of those stories aren't very nice. They're usually very selfish. And when somebody's in those initial stages, they don't believe what I say here. It's not until they crash out of it later, or they start to find out that people aren't behaving from that space of light, and like, oh no. And then this can draw the person down into a dark night of the soul, spiral, and other things like that are completely unnecessary. If somebody's prepared, you don't really go into a dark night. You're going to go into some difficult things, but a lot of how I talk about the dark night of the soul is the ego being upset. It's profoundly upset. And if there's physical problems and emotional problems as well going on, that makes it easier for the ego to be upset and say, life is terrible. I've lost all faith. I can't do this anymore. There's no way out. It's endless. So it's a very despairing space. There's lots of reasons people get into dark nights, but in the spiritual context, when we've awakened energy, this should not happen. And even if it does, if somebody's prepared, they probably have supports around them that they've developed because they've been talking to their teacher, and the teacher's like, this can happen. You can end up in those places. And this is how we're going to work on them together. Or you have a community that understands. Well, that's going to be a little bit more rare. I really am talking about this today because I want any of you who are watching this video to be taken care of. I want any of you who are watching this video to be ready to embrace this incredible transformation. Most people don't get very far after awakening their energy. After almost 10 years of doing this work, I've seen this consistently. Most people, what they do is either rolling back into the original unconsciousness after several years of turbulence, or they find a way to plateau and build this new spiritual ego, which in of itself is unconscious, because that's just trying to hide these deeper insecurities that during the initial years you can't really hide anymore because the energy is pushing them up. And that experience of having issues pushed up is very unique. It's another thing that when I work with people who haven't had an awakening, which is most people actually, what we're trying to do is help the energy system and the intellectual part of the person understand what it's like to push something up, to release it, and to feel better for having let it go, for letting go of that very physical aspect of attachment. Getting practiced in letting go of attachments is critical. It's like clearing the way in the riverbed so that if that dam breaks and that awakened energy starts washing down the riverbed, you're not going to be hitting every rock and branch of your life that you have left behind. And ultimately, we leave nothing behind. We carry it all within us. For anyone who is a practitioner using some of these serious tools, you really should stop if you don't know how to handle bringing the person back down from the moon. For those of you who think that this is just a fun little game that will make you feel better or feel blissful all the time or whatever is being promised, it doesn't. And you should stop and go use simpler tools. Go work on issues and attachments you already know you have. Working with therapists and counselors is really important at times. I don't think that gets appreciated enough. Sometimes people see that as some sort of failure. It's like you're not going to get medicated. You're going to work through things you know you already have. Because if you want to be serious about dissolving the ego and letting go of all attachments, you're going to run into these things. We can't escape these things. We do not escape our past when we're attached to it. And learning how to surrender, to simply come back to being aware to being the observer, to watch things move through rather than to identify with them and to get attached to them, is really important preparation. Because when you're in the midst of that initial flood, it's really difficult to not feel like this is somehow personal. It feels very personal. It is very personal in a way, but the same way, it's also not, right? It's something that the observer, that awareness inside, watches arising. The more we watch and allow it to arise, it's kind of like a seed sprouting, and it pushes through the dirt and pushes out of its shell. And those are not easy phases for the little sprout. But fortunately, we're not seeds. We have human brains, and we can understand these things ahead of time. So if you are seriously considering about using some of these tools with the intent of awakening your energy, please look at the resources I have on my blog and on my other videos that talk about preparing. Because we have to prepare the mind, the heart, and the body to handle the strain of transformation. Because even when those of us know how to surrender or surrendering, there is a strain to it. There is a way that our unconscious self still holds on. So we have to have the part of our mind and our bodies and our hearts where we have some level of guidance. We have to practice surrendering there, because we're going to find out just how much of our bodies, hearts, and minds we don't have any control over, that we've lost control, that it's truly our unconscious is running like 90% of the show. We're probably lucky to have 10% of the show. And we don't realize that going into awakened energy. That's another reason why people will just say, oh, it's fun, it feels good. And fortunately for most people, it is just fun and feels good. Right? If it happened every time that somebody used something like Kundalini meditation, that they immediately awaken their energy, we'd be having a very different dialogue. But plenty of people use it and they're fine. And everybody's energy is different. It's going to respond differently. But some of you, it's going to work. So please, look at the resources that I've offered that go along with this video. Check out my blog, spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Check out Jim Toll's, my YouTube video channel, and prepare yourself. Do the work for several years, honestly, to know how to come back to awareness, to use meditation to calm the nervous system, because it's going to need some calming if you turn that energy system on. And find a good spiritual teacher to help get you to the point where if that switch goes, you're in a better space to come back from the moon after you launch yourself out into outer space, and to land safely and transformed. If you have further thoughts and questions, feel free to reach out to me. I have a newsletter where you can get more of my thoughts as well. And I hope this has guided you on your journey.